Hello everyone, I thought I'd do a video on is the GP-5 gas mask safe, because I get asked this over and over again in the comments, even though I've sort of already included this in the video. So what I thought I'd do was just do a video titled is the GP-5 gas mask safe, and then talk about it in this video so that hopefully more people find it rather than asking me over and over again in the comments of other videos, is the GP-5 gas mask safe? And the short answer is probably not. But what we should say is the mask itself is safe, not the filter. So if you take this mask, you wear it without the filter on it, as long as there's no weird residue inside the mask, or you put a safe filter on the mask, then the mask is perfectly safe in itself. The danger comes from the GP-5's filter. Now, the GP-5's filter may or may not contain asbestos, and the reason I say may or may not contain is we generally don't know for certain, and it's likely certain Russian filters had it in during production, others didn't. So, some history on the mask I'm sure everybody knows that's sort of watching this type of video. GP-5 is the world's most produced gas mask. It was designed as a civilian gas mask, although from photos it looks like it was issued to soldiers during the Cold War in the USSR. Mostly Russia, but some of the other Warsaw Pact countries have had variants of it issued, if not the actual GP-5. And by standard they came with these green sort of olive filters, and in this filter there is basically a paper type layer which acts as the aerosol filter, and then there's a charcoal layer that acts as a sort of filter for other things that wouldn't be sort of biological agents that would get through the first layer. So a lot of people say this mask filter should be safe because it was produced after gas masks stopped using asbestos, and that's true. Most masks sort of in the filters stopped using asbestos in most countries in about the 50s or 60s, when the main health dangers of asbestos became known. However, the GP-5 might be an exception to that rule. And from people translating old Russian production manuals, we know that a lot of Russian filters from the Cold War used asbestos as a compound, not as the pure filter mechanic. Basically, in a World War II mask, if you look inside the filter, a lot of it is just blue asbestos, which is very dangerous if you inhale it, but at the time they were built, a lot of the dangers weren't known about blue asbestos, and the asbestos inside the mask filter was all tight together, so it wasn't falling apart. So when you inhaled it, you wouldn't inhale the asbestos, you'd inhale the air that's passed through the filter itself, and the dangers of the filters weren't as well known as they are today. So once you get into the 60s, everybody isn't really using asbestos in filters anymore, they're using other materials. However, the Russians seem to still use it as a compound, which a lot of manuals say. So about 2% or 3% of this filter might be asbestos, it's just mixed in with other materials. So again, it's not that dangerous, but you still don't want to inhale it if you can avoid it. Basically what happens with filters, and this is a general rule for any filter, not just the Russian ones, as the filter gets older it breaks down, as I was saying about the World War II filters, and that means you have a danger of inhaling anything that's come loose inside the filter. So it's a bit like how you have food with expiry dates. With a filter, when it's out of its expiry date, or if the filter's suffered some sort of damage, the inside of the filter can begin breaking down more into a sort of dust or smaller, smaller particles. And when you're breathing through that section where the cotton wool is at the top, you could be breathing in materials that have broken down. Sort of the activated charcoal could have turned into a finer powder, or the other filter medium, and that could be dangerous to your lungs if it sticks to your lung lining, like asbestos does. So even if this filter didn't contain asbestos, the age of the filters mean if you inhale through them it could be dangerous. So, as said, the GP-5 filter probably isn't safe, although some production runs had different stuff in than others. Just as some Russian filters we know for definite, like the brown coffee can filters, did contain asbestos, because they were designed to be, quite thorough, good filters, so they used asbestos in them. But as I've also said, the mask itself is totally safe. Is in, without the filter on, as long as there's nothing weird in the mask, there's going to be no danger in putting the mask on and using it without a filter. Or if you're going to use it with a filter, use either a prop filter, so one that's got no internals to it, or a filter with, a brand new filter from something you've managed to get to fit on there. Another thing I was going to mention is a lot of people cut these filters open and say there's not asbestos in them. that's not entirely true, because you'd have to be looking with quite a high-powered microscope to see if there's asbestos in the compound. And if you are going to cut one of these filters up, do it in a well-ventilated area. Don't do it in your bedroom or living room if you're going to potentially be spreading asbestos around. But saying that, having this as a display filter is perfectly safe because there's nothing leaking out the filter. And as I said, with these masks being asbestos perhaps in a compound, it's not as bad as having a filter that's 70% blue asbestos just sitting there. So hopefully that answers your question. Is the GP-5 gas mask safe? The gas mask itself is safe, the filter is probably not. Newer Russian filters don't have asbestos in, as in post-Soviet ones, so if you wanted to stick one of those on, it should fit the thread fine. You could wear it with a newer filter, such as the latest versions of the PMK users. But yeah, these filters probably did contain asbestos, or at least are breaking down and not going to be much good and are potentially hazardous. So other than a prop, put a new filter on it if you want to actually use the mask for anything. So hopefully that's answered your question about the safety of the GP-5 gas mask.